Sometimes the most ordinary moments hide the most extraordinary secrets. What happens when a simple security check reveals a truth so shocking that it changes everything you thought you knew about someone? This is the story of Dr. Sarah Chen, a woman whose quiet life concealed access to some of the world's most classified information, and the security guard whose routine day became anything but ordinary when he discovered who she really was. The morning rain drummed against the glass windows of the Meridian Research Complex as Dr. Sarah Chen approached the main entrance. Her worn leather briefcase clutched tightly in her right hand. She had made this same walk countless times over the past 3 years, but today felt different somehow. Perhaps it was the way the security guard's eyes lingered on her as she approached. Or maybe it was the subtle tension that seemed to hang in the air, like the storm clouds overhead. Sarah had always been unremarkable in the way that served her purposes best. At 42, she possessed the kind of forgettable appearance that made her blend seamlessly into crowds. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her clothes were the standard uniform of academic researchers everywhere. Sensible flats, dark slacks, and a cardigan that had seen better days. Nothing about her suggested that she carried secrets that could reshape global politics. The Meridian Research Complex housed dozens of private companies, government contractors, and academic research groups. Most employees assumed it was just another corporate office building, the kind that dotted the landscape of Northern Virginia, like monuments to bureaucratic efficiency. They had no idea that beneath the unremarkable exterior lay one of the most sophisticated intelligence analysis centers in the world. Marcus Rodriguez had been working security at Meridian for 8 months, and he prided himself on knowing every face that passed through those doors. At 26, he was young for a security supervisor, but his military background and natural attention to detail had earned him the respect of his colleagues and superiors alike. His job was straightforward: check badges, verify access levels, and ensure that only authorized personnel entered the building. It was routine work, but Marcus treated it with the seriousness that his army training had instilled in him. As Sarah approached the security checkpoint, she noticed something was different. Usually, there were 2 guards on duty during the morning shift, but today Marcus stood alone behind the reinforced glass partition. The second scanner station was dark, and yellow maintenance tags hung from its base. Technical difficulties, she assumed, though the timing seemed oddly coincidental. Marcus watched Sarah approach with the same professional courtesy he extended to all employees. He had seen her before, of course. Dr. Chen was one of the quiet ones, the researchers who came and went without fanfare, never causing trouble or drawing attention to themselves. Her badge identified her as working for Cognitive Systems Research, a small firm that occupied the 3rd floor and supposedly developed artificial intelligence applications for commercial use. Sarah slid her badge through the scanner with practiced ease, the same motion she had performed thousands of times before. But instead of the familiar green light and soft beep that would grant her access, the machine emitted a harsh red glow and a warning tone that seemed to echo through the lobby. Marcus frowned and leaned forward, his training kicking in automatically. Badge malfunctions were common enough, usually the result of magnetic interference or simple wear and tear, but something about the scanner's response struck him as unusual. The display showed not an error message, but a series of codes he had never seen before. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Marcus said, his voice professional but firm. "There seems to be an issue with your badge. Could you please step to the side while I run a manual verification?" Sarah felt her pulse quicken, though her expression remained perfectly calm. She had been through security protocols more times than she could count, in facilities far more sensitive than this one. The key was always to remain composed, to project the image of someone who belonged exactly where they were. "Of course," she replied, moving to the secondary screening area. "The magnetic strip has been acting up lately. I've been meaning to get it replaced." It was a reasonable explanation, the kind of mundane problem that occurred in office buildings everywhere. But as Marcus began the manual verification process, entering Sarah's employee number into the security database, he realized that Dr. Sarah Chen might not be quite who she appeared to be. The first red flag was subtle. According to the system, Dr. Chen's clearance level was listed as Level 3 General Access, which should have allowed her into most areas of the building during normal business hours. But when Marcus ran the badge number through the scanner's diagnostic system, it returned a completely different result. The screen flickered for a moment, then displayed a message that made Marcus's blood run cold. Clearance level, Cosmic. Authorize immediately. Marcus had been in the army long enough to know that cosmic clearance was reserved for the most sensitive intelligence operations, the kind that required approval from the highest levels of government. It was the clearance level held by generals, intelligence directors, and senior officials who dealt with information so sensitive that its unauthorized disclosure could threaten national security. He looked up at Sarah, who was waiting patiently by the security desk, her expression showing nothing more than mild inconvenience. Everything about her suggested she was exactly what she appeared to be, a middle-aged researcher who worked with computer algorithms and probably went home to a quiet apartment and a cat. But the scanner didn't lie. Marcus's training told him to follow protocol. When faced with an anomaly like this, security procedures required him to detain the individual, contact his supervisor, and wait for guidance from higher authorities. But something in Sarah's demeanor suggested that this was not a mistake or a security breach. This was something else entirely. "Dr. Chen," Marcus said carefully, "I'm going to need to see some additional identification." Sarah reached into her briefcase and withdrew a slim black wallet. From it, she produced a card that Marcus had seen only once before, during his security training. It was unmarked except for a small holographic seal and a series of numbers that identified it as a special access program credential. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. Special access programs were the government's most closely guarded secrets, compartmented operations that existed beyond the normal classification system. They were the black projects, the operations so sensitive that their very existence was classified. "There's been a system update," Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying a note of authority that hadn't been there before. "My cover credentials should have been synchronized with my actual access level last night. It appears there was a delay in the process." Cover credentials. The words hung in the air between them, transforming Sarah from a harmless researcher into something far more complex and potentially dangerous. Marcus realized that for 8 months he had been greeting a covert intelligence operative with nothing more than a polite nod and a routine badge scan. The security phone rang, its sharp tone cutting through the tension in the lobby. Marcus answered it automatically, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face. "Rodriguez here." The voice on the other end was crisp and professional. "Marcus, this is Director Walsh from upstairs. Is Dr. Chen there with you?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Please escort her to the executive elevator immediately. Use your override key to send her directly to the 15th floor. Do not log this interaction in your report." The line went dead, leaving Marcus staring at the phone in confusion. The Meridian Research Complex only had 12 floors. Sarah was watching him with an expression that might have been sympathy. "I know this is confusing," she said, "and I know you have questions. But I need you to trust me and follow Director Walsh's instructions exactly as he gave them to you." Marcus looked down at his security console, where Sarah's real credentials were still displayed on the screen. The clearance level was higher than anything he had ever seen, higher than anything he had imagined existed outside of Hollywood movies. Whatever Dr. Blome. Sarah Chen really did for a living, it was something that required access to the most sensitive secrets of the United States government. He reached for his keyring, finding the red override key that he had been told to use only in the most extreme emergencies. As he inserted it into the elevator control panel, Marcus wondered what kind of work required a woman to spend 3 years pretending to be someone she wasn't, walking through the same security checkpoint every day, building a cover identity so perfect that even the guards who saw her daily had no idea who she really was. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, revealing an interior that looked exactly like every other elevator in the building. But as Sarah stepped inside and turned to face him, Marcus caught a glimpse of something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. It wasn't fear or excitement or even relief. It was the look of someone who was finally free to stop pretending. "Thank you, Marcus," she said as the doors began to close. "You did exactly the right thing." The elevator rose silently past the 12th floor, past the point where it should have stopped, carrying Sarah Chen to a part of the building that officially didn't exist. Marcus stood alone in the lobby, staring at the closed doors and wondering how many other secrets walked through his checkpoint every day, hidden behind the faces of people who seemed perfectly ordinary. His radio crackled to life, the voice of his supervisor cutting through his thoughts. "Marcus, report to my office when your shift ends. We need to discuss your security clearance upgrade." Security clearance upgrade. The words sent a chill down Marcus's spine as he realized that witnessing Sarah's true identity had just changed his life in ways he couldn't yet understand. In a world of classified operations, there were no innocent bystanders. Once you knew the secret existed, you became part of it. The lobby returned to its normal, quiet efficiency, with employees swiping their badges and passing through security as if nothing unusual had happened. But Marcus knew that everything had changed. The woman he had known as Dr. Michael, Sarah Chen, had just revealed herself to be someone else entirely, someone whose real work was so sensitive that the government had spent 3 years maintaining an elaborate fiction to protect it. As the morning wore on and the routine of security checks resumed, Marcus found himself looking at every employee with new eyes. How many of them were exactly who they appeared to be? How many carried secrets that could change the world? And what kind of operation required such elaborate deception that even the security guards were kept in the dark? The rain continued to fall against the windows, washing the city clean and carrying away the last traces of Sarah Chen's old identity. Somewhere above, in a part of the building that didn't officially exist, the woman who had pretended to be a computer researcher for 3 years was finally free to return to her real work. But Marcus was just beginning to understand that in the world of intelligence operations, nothing was ever quite what it seemed, and his quiet job as a security guard had just become anything but ordinary. The elevator that carried Sarah Chen past the 12th floor opened into a world that existed in the shadows of official denial. The 15th floor of the Meridian Research Complex was a place that appeared on no building plans, received no mail delivery, and employed people who officially worked somewhere else entirely. As the doors slid open, Sarah stepped into a corridor that looked more like the interior of a submarine than an office building, all brushed steel and recessed lighting, with the subtle hum of advanced electronics filling the air. Director Walsh was waiting for her, a tall man in his 50s whose grey suit and tired eyes spoke of decades spent managing operations that couldn't be discussed at dinner parties. Behind him, the corridor stretched toward a series of reinforced doors, each one marked only with numbers and biometric scanners that required more than a simple badge swipe. "Welcome back, Dr. Chen," Walsh said, though they both knew that wasn't her real name either. "I trust your transition went smoothly?" Sarah nodded, allowing herself a small smile. Marcus handled it well, better than most would have. He's former military. They adapt faster to compartmentalized information. Walsh began walking down the corridor, his footsteps muffled by the specialized flooring designed to prevent electronic eavesdropping. "We've been monitoring the situation since last night. Beijing moved faster than our projections indicated. They passed through 3 separate security checkpoints, each one requiring different combinations of biometric verification. Retinal scan, handprint analysis, voice recognition, even a blood sample that was processed by a machine Sarah didn't recognize. The level of security was extraordinary, even by the standards of someone who had spent 15 years working in the intelligence community. The briefing room they entered was windowless and lined with copper mesh that blocked all electronic signals. Around a polished steel table sat 6 people, each one representing a different aspect of an operation that had been 3 years in the making. Sarah recognized most of them, colleagues from various agencies who had been read into the program at different stages. Colonel James Mitchell, Defense Intelligence Agency, was a compact man whose close-cropped hair and rigid posture made him look like he had stepped directly off a military parade ground. Dr. Rebecca Torres from the National Security Agency possessed the pale complexion of someone who spent her days in underground facilities analyzing signals intelligence from around the world. Agent David Park from the CIA had the unremarkable appearance that marked him as a career field operative, the kind of man who could disappear into any crowd in any country. The other 3 were new faces, which meant the operation had expanded since Sarah's last briefing. One was a young woman with the intense focus of a technical specialist. Another was an older man whose expensive suit suggested he represented someone with significant political influence. And the third was a woman in military uniform whose rank insignia identified her as Navy intelligence. "Dr. Bikat Chan," Walsh began, using the name that had become second nature over the past 3 years. Or, should I say, Dr. Lin Wei Ming. "Your cover identity has served its purpose admirably. But recent developments in Beijing require us to move to the next phase immediately." The use of her real name sent a strange chill through Sarah. Lin Weiming was someone she had been forced to bury so deeply that sometimes she almost forgot she had ever existed. Born in Taiwan, educated at MIT and Stanford, she had been recruited by American intelligence while completing her doctorate in quantum computing. Her parents believed she worked for a private technology company. Her few friends thought she was a boring researcher who spent too much time with computers. Neither group knew that Lin Weiming had spent the past decade infiltrating Chinese intelligence networks, using her expertise in quantum cryptography to understand and ultimately compromise Beijing's most sophisticated communication systems. "The situation has escalated," continued Dr. Torres, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had been analyzing intercepted communications for weeks. "Our sources inside the Ministry of State Security indicate that they've discovered the existence of Operation Shade du Net. Though they don't yet know the full scope of our penetration, Operation Shakedown. Even hearing the codename aloud in this secure room sent adrenaline coursing through Sarah's veins. It was the culmination of everything she had worked toward, a quantum computing breakthrough that would give American intelligence agencies the ability to decrypt virtually any message sent over China's military and intelligence networks.
How much do they know?
Sarah asked, settling into her chair with the practiced calm of someone accustomed to receiving devastating news in sterile briefing rooms. Colonel Mitchell opened a classified folder and spread several photographs across the table. They showed a compound in the mountains outside Beijing, a facility that looked like a cross between a university campus and a military installation. Satellite imagery from 48 hours ago shows increased activity at the Quantum Research Institute. Vehicle traffic is up 300%, and we've identified several high-ranking MSS officials who don't normally involve themselves in academic research. Agent Park leaned forward, his expression grim. We have a human asset inside the facility. His last communication suggested that they're preparing to implement a complete overhaul of their quantum encryption protocols. If they succeed, we'll lose our window of opportunity. The window of opportunity. Sarah knew exactly what that meant. For 2 years, she had been feeding carefully crafted disinformation through channels that Beijing believed were secure. Mathematical equations that appeared to represent breakthrough research, but actually contained subtle flaws that would cripple any quantum computer built using Chinese specifications. It was elegant, sophisticated, and absolutely devastating to any nation that relied on quantum encryption for its most sensitive communications. But it only worked if the Chinese continued to trust the information they were receiving. What's the timeline? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. 72 hours, Walsh replied. Maybe less. Our technical analysis suggests that once they begin implementing the new protocols, we'll have less than a week before they discover the deception. After that, all of our advantages disappear. The young technical specialist spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the urgency of someone who understood the implications better than most. Dr. Chen, the quantum algorithms you've been developing here weren't just theoretical research. We've been building a functioning quantum computer based on your specifications, one that can break Chinese encryption in real time. But we need the final component of your work to make it operational. Sarah felt the weight of 3 years of careful planning settling on her shoulders. Every day she had spent pretending to be someone else. Every conversation with colleagues who didn't know her real identity, every moment of isolation and deception had been leading to this moment. The final algorithm is complete, she said quietly. But implementing it requires physical access to Chinese quantum research facilities. Someone needs to be on site to upload the code and verify that it integrates properly with their existing systems. The silence that followed her words was heavy with implication. Everyone in the room understood what she was suggesting, and everyone knew that it was the kind of mission that intelligence officers planned for but hoped never to execute. Agent Park was the first to speak. Getting you into China isn't the problem. We have assets in place who can create the necessary documentation and establish a cover identity. But getting you into the Quantum Research Institute requires a level of access that we've never been able to penetrate. Actually, said the older man in the expensive suit, speaking for the first time, that may not be as difficult as we originally thought. Dr. Lin Wei-Ming received an invitation 3 weeks ago to speak at the International Quantum Computing Conference in Shanghai. The conference is being held at Shanghai University, but there's a scheduled tour of the Beijing facility for selected participants. Sarah stared at him in surprise. How do you know about that invitation? I never mentioned it to anyone. Because we arranged it, Walsh said, through intermediaries who don't know they're working for us. Your reputation as Dr. Chen has been carefully constructed over 3 years, but Lin Wei-Ming's academic credentials are completely legitimate. The invitation was extended because the Chinese scientific community genuinely respects your published research. The elegant complexity of the operation began to reveal itself to Sarah like a puzzle whose final pieces were falling into place. Her cover identity as Dr. Chen had been designed not just to hide her real work, but to maintain and enhance her academic reputation as Lin Wei-Ming. Every paper she had published, every conference she had attended, every professional relationship she had cultivated had been part of a larger plan to position her for this moment. There's one more thing, said the woman in Navy uniform. We've learned that Dr. Zhang Yifei, the director of the Quantum Research Institute, specifically requested your participation in the conference. He wants to meet with you personally to discuss collaborative research opportunities. Dr. Zhang Yifei. Sarah knew the name well, though they had never met in person. He was one of China's leading quantum physicists, a man whose work was advancing Chinese capabilities in quantum computing at an alarming rate. He was also, according to intelligence assessments, personally involved in developing the quantum encryption systems that protected Beijing's most sensitive communications.
How long do I have to prepare? Sarah asked.
Your flight to Shanghai leaves in 18 hours, Walsh replied. Dr. Lin Wei-Ming will be traveling on her Taiwanese passport, with full academic credentials and a cover story that will withstand any reasonable scrutiny. You'll be accompanied by 2 other academics who are actually our operatives, though they won't know your real identity or mission. Colonel Mitchell pushed another folder across the table. Everything you need is in here. Academic papers that establish your expertise, biographical information that explains your background, and most importantly, the technical specifications for the quantum algorithm that you'll need to upload to their system. Sarah opened the folder and found herself looking at documents that described a life she had actually lived, though one that had been carefully edited to remove any trace of her connection to American intelligence. According to these papers, Lin Wei-Ming was exactly what she appeared to be, a brilliant scientist whose work in quantum computing had earned her international recognition. There's something else, Dr. Torres said, her expression more serious than before. Our signals intelligence indicates that the MSS suspects a security breach, but they don't know its nature or scope. They're implementing enhanced security protocols for all foreign visitors, including comprehensive background checks and electronic surveillance.
How comprehensive? Sarah asked.
Assume that every conversation will be monitored, every phone call recorded, and every electronic device scanned. They'll be looking for any indication that you're anything other than what you appear to be. Agent Park leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. The good news is that your cover identity is so deep and so well established that it should withstand even enhanced scrutiny. You've been living as Lin Wei-Ming for your entire adult life, with only a brief period as Dr. Minor Chen. From their perspective, you're a Taiwanese academic with legitimate research interests and no connection to American intelligence. The bad news, Walsh continued, is that if they discover your real purpose, you'll be completely on your own. This operation doesn't officially exist, which means we can't acknowledge your presence in China or provide official diplomatic protection if something goes wrong. Sarah nodded, understanding the implications completely. She would be operating in a hostile country with no official backup, trying to penetrate one of their most sensitive research facilities, all while maintaining a cover identity that had to be perfect in every detail. When do I get my final briefing? She asked. Now, Walsh said, standing up and walking to a wall panel that Sarah hadn't noticed before. When he pressed his palm against what looked like a blank section of wall, it slid aside to reveal another room, this one filled with computer equipment that looked like something from a science fiction movie. Welcome to the real cognitive systems research, he said. This is where we've been building the quantum computer that will give us access to Chinese communications. And this is where you'll spend the next 16 hours learning everything you need to know to complete the most important mission of your career. As Sarah followed him into the hidden room, she realized that her 3 years of patient deception were finally coming to an end. Soon, she would have to become Lin Wei-Ming again, stepping back into her real identity to complete an operation that could shift the balance of global intelligence gathering. But first, she had to learn how to break into the most secure computer facility in China, upload a quantum algorithm that would cripple their entire encryption system, and escape before they realized what had happened. The next 18 hours would determine whether 3 years of careful planning would result in one of the greatest intelligence victories in American history, or whether Sarah Lin Wei-Ming Chen would disappear forever into the Chinese prison system, another casualty of the shadow war fought in the spaces between official acknowledgement and absolute denial. The Shanghai Pudong International Airport buzzed with the controlled chaos of international travel, but Sarah felt the familiar calm that came from slipping into a carefully constructed identity. She was no longer Dr. Sarah Chen, the quiet researcher who had spent 3 years perfecting a cover story. She was Lin Wei-Ming again, a quantum physicist from Taiwan whose reputation in academic circles was both genuine and carefully cultivated. Her connecting flight from San Francisco had been deliberately chosen to establish a paper trail that would satisfy even the most paranoid security analyst. Dr. Planet. Lin had supposedly spent the past month conducting research at Stanford University, collaborating with colleagues who would confirm her presence if asked. What they wouldn't mention because they didn't know was that her real work had involved memorizing the layout of the Beijing Quantum Research Institute and practicing the precise sequence of keystrokes that would upload a devastating piece of malware into China's most advanced computer systems. The two academics traveling with her were perfect in their roles, discussing quantum entanglement theory with the passion of people who genuinely understood and cared about the subject. Dr. Barbachok, Michael Harrison from MIT, was actually a CIA operative with a doctorate in theoretical physics, while Professor Anna Kowalski from the University of Chicago was NSA, though her expertise in quantum cryptography was entirely legitimate. Neither knew Sarah's real mission, and both believed they were providing cover for a routine intelligence-gathering operation. Sarah's luggage contained exactly what would be expected of an academic attending an international conference: research papers, a laptop containing her published work, and personal items that reflected the life of someone who spent most of her time thinking about mathematical equations. Hidden within the laptop's operating system, invisible to any conventional security scan, was the quantum algorithm that would give American intelligence agencies unprecedented access to Chinese military communications. The algorithm itself was a masterpiece of mathematical elegance and digital deception. It appeared to be a routine error correction protocol, the kind of mundane code that kept quantum computers functioning properly. But once uploaded to a quantum system, it would create a backdoor that allowed remote access while appearing to strengthen the system's security. It was the kind of sophisticated attack that took years to develop and could remain undetected indefinitely. As their plane descended toward Shanghai, Sarah watched the city skyline emerge from the early morning haze. Somewhere to the north, in a facility nestled in the mountains outside Beijing, Dr. Zhang Yifei was preparing for her arrival. Intelligence reports suggested he was genuinely excited about the possibility of collaboration with one of Taiwan's most prominent quantum physicists. His enthusiasm would make the deception both easier and more personally difficult. The immigration process at Shanghai Pudong was thorough but professional. Sarah's Taiwanese passport received the careful scrutiny she had expected, and her academic credentials were verified through databases that confirmed her legitimate research history. The security officer who processed her entry was polite and efficient, clearly accustomed to handling international academics who attended conferences in China regularly. But Sarah noticed the subtle signs of enhanced security protocols. Additional cameras had been installed since her last intelligence briefing, and the facial recognition scanners were newer models capable of matching faces against databases in real time. Her cover identity was solid enough to withstand this level of scrutiny, but it served as a reminder that Chinese security services were increasingly sophisticated in their approach to counterintelligence.
The Shanghai Quantum Computing Conference was being held at the university's new science complex, a gleaming monument to China's determination to lead the world in advanced technology.
The building itself was impressive, with soaring glass walls and architectural lines that suggested both academic openness and technological sophistication. Inside, nearly 300 researchers from around the world had gathered to share the latest developments in quantum computing. Sarah's first presentation was scheduled for the afternoon session, a technical discussion of quantum error correction that built on research she had actually conducted during her graduate studies. The irony wasn't lost on her that she would be discussing methods for preventing computational errors while preparing to introduce the most sophisticated error-inducing code ever developed. Dr. Zhang Yifei approached her during the morning coffee break, and Sarah felt her pulse quicken as she prepared to meet the man whose computer systems she would be attempting to compromise. He was younger than his photograph suggested, perhaps 45, with the intense focus of someone accustomed to thinking in mathematical abstractions. His English was excellent, though he spoke with the careful precision of someone using a second language. "Dr. Lin?" he said, extending his hand with genuine warmth. "I've been following your work on quantum decoherence for several years. Your papers on maintaining quantum states in noisy environments are quite remarkable." "Thank you, Dr. Mej. Zhang. Your research on quantum key distribution has been equally impressive. I've incorporated several of your theoretical frameworks into my own work. It was a perfectly normal academic conversation, the kind that occurred at conferences around the world every day. But Sarah was acutely aware that she was speaking to someone whose quantum encryption systems protected some of China's most sensitive military communications, while he was speaking to someone whose real job involved finding ways to compromise those same systems. "I understand you'll be joining us for the facility tour tomorrow," Jane continued. "I'm particularly excited to show you our latest quantum computer. It's based on some revolutionary approaches to error correction that I think you'll find fascinating." "I'm looking forward to it," Sarah replied, meaning every word. The Beijing facility tour was her primary objective, the reason for 3 years of careful preparation and elaborate deception. But she found herself genuinely curious about Zhang's research, impressed by his obvious intelligence and dedication to advancing human knowledge. The remainder of the day proceeded according to the schedule Sarah had memorized during her briefings. She attended technical sessions, participated in discussions about the future of quantum computing, and gradually established her presence as a legitimate conference participant. Her presentation was well received, drawing questions from colleagues who were genuinely interested in her theoretical work. But beneath the routine of academic discussion, Sarah was conducting a different kind of research. She observed security protocols, noted the types of electronic devices that conference participants carried, and listened carefully to conversations about Chinese quantum research capabilities. Everything she learned would be included in her debriefing report, assuming she survived long enough to deliver one. That evening, at the conference dinner held in a restaurant overlooking the Huangpu River, Sarah found herself seated at Dr. Zhang's table. The conversation ranged from technical discussions of quantum computing to more personal topics about the challenges of conducting research in a rapidly evolving field. Zhang spoke with obvious pride about the Beijing facility and his team of researchers, describing their work as both a scientific endeavor and a contribution to China's national development. "You know," he said during a pause in the conversation, "I've been thinking about proposing a formal collaboration between our research groups. Taiwan and the mainland have political differences, but science transcends politics. The problems we're trying to solve affect all of humanity." Sarah felt a stab of something that might have been guilt. Here was a man who genuinely believed in the power of scientific collaboration to bridge political divides, and she was planning to exploit his trust to conduct an operation that would damage his country's national security interests. "That's an intriguing possibility," she replied carefully, "though I imagine there would be significant bureaucratic obstacles to overcome." "Perhaps," Zhang conceded, "but I believe the potential benefits justify the effort. We're working on applications of quantum computing that could revolutionize everything from medical research to climate modeling. Political boundaries shouldn't prevent us from sharing knowledge that could benefit everyone." The conversation continued late into the evening, and Sarah found herself genuinely enjoying Zhang's company. He was intelligent, passionate about his work, and possessed a vision of scientific cooperation that transcended national interests. In different circumstances, she might have been honored to collaborate with someone of his caliber, but circumstances were what they were, and Sarah had a mission to complete. The following morning brought clear skies and the kind of crisp autumn air that made Beijing beautiful despite its reputation for pollution. The bus that transported conference participants to the Quantum Research Institute wound through mountain roads that offered stunning views of the countryside, though Sarah was more interested in observing the security checkpoints they passed along the way. The facility itself exceeded her expectations. Rather than the stark military installation she had envisioned, the Beijing Quantum Research Institute looked like a modern university campus, with buildings designed to promote both security and collaboration. The architecture suggested an institution that took pride in its work and wanted to attract the best researchers from around the world. Security was present but unobtrusive. The main gate was staffed by guards who checked identification with professional courtesy, and visitors were issued temporary badges that tracked their movements throughout the facility. Sarah noticed surveillance cameras positioned to monitor all access points, but they were discreet enough not to interfere with the academic atmosphere the facility was clearly trying to maintain. Dr. Zhang served as their guide, leading the group through laboratories where researchers worked on problems that represented the cutting edge of quantum computing. Sarah saw equipment worth millions of dollars, experimental setups that existed in only a handful of facilities worldwide, and theoretical work that could fundamentally change humanity's understanding of information and computation. "This is our main quantum computer," Zhang said as they entered a room that hummed with the sound of sophisticated cooling systems. "It's currently the most advanced quantum processor in Asia, capable of maintaining quantum states longer than any previous system." The machine before them was beautiful in the way that only truly advanced technology could be. Banks of equipment surrounded a central chamber where the quantum processor itself was kept at temperatures colder than deep space, isolated from any external interference that could disrupt its delicate quantum states. It represented years of research, millions of dollars in investment, and the work of some of the most brilliant scientists in China. Sarah studied the system with professional appreciation while memorizing every detail for her mission. She noted the types of access ports, the positioning of security cameras, and the procedures that researchers used to interact with the system. Most importantly, she identified the maintenance terminal that would allow her to upload her algorithm if she could gain unsupervised access. "The error correction protocols are particularly sophisticated," Zhang continued, clearly proud of the technical achievement. We've managed to reduce quantum decoherence to levels that allow for practical computation on problems that were previously impossible to solve. How do you handle software updates? Asked Dr. Darsky. Harrison, playing his role perfectly while gathering information that would be valuable for intelligence purposes. Systems this complex must require regular maintenance. We have automated protocols that update error correction algorithms remotely, Zhang replied. But any major changes require physical access to the maintenance terminal for security reasons. We can't risk introducing vulnerabilities through remote connections. Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction. Zhang had just confirmed that her planned approach was the only viable method for uploading her algorithm. Remote access was impossible, but the maintenance terminal could accept updates if someone with physical access knew the proper procedures. The tour continued through several more laboratories, each one offering insights into Chinese quantum research capabilities that would be invaluable to American intelligence analysts. Sarah committed everything to memory while maintaining the outward appearance of an academic visitor impressed by the facility's achievements. As the afternoon wore on, she began to prepare for the most dangerous phase of her mission. That evening, while her fellow conference participants returned to Shanghai, Sarah would find a way to slip back into the facility and gain access to the quantum computer she had just observed. It was a plan that required precise timing, considerable technical skill, and more than a little luck. But, as she watched Dr. Zhang explained his research with obvious passion and pride, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to betray more than just Chinese national security interests. She was about to exploit the trust of someone who genuinely believed that scientific collaboration could transcend political differences, someone whose only crime was working for a government that American intelligence agencies considered a strategic rival. The bus ride back to Shanghai was quiet, with conference participants exhausted by the technical presentations and impressed by what they had seen. Sarah stared out the window at the passing countryside, knowing that in a few hours she would be attempting to return to the facility under very different circumstances. Her mission was clear, her training was complete, and the stakes couldn't be higher. But as she prepared for what could be the most important operation of her career, Sarah found herself wondering whether the intelligence victory she was about to achieve was worth the price she would have to pay for it. The rain began falling just after midnight, a steady drizzle that turned the mountain roads slick and reduced visibility to exactly the conditions Sarah had been hoping for. She sat in the rented sedan 2 kilometers from the Beijing Quantum Research Institute, watching the security patrol vehicles pass at precisely timed intervals. 3 years of planning had led to this moment, and everything depended on the next. 6 hours going exactly according to plan. Her transformation from conference participant back to covert operative had begun the moment she separated from the other academics at Shanghai Airport. While Dr. Fedgadia, Harrison and Professor Kowalski boarded their flights back to the United States believing their mission was complete, Sarah had quietly boarded a domestic flight to Beijing using documentation that identified her as Liu Mei, a software engineer employed by a company that provided technical services to government research facilities. The Liu Mei identity was another masterpiece of intelligence preparation, complete with employment records, bank accounts, and personal history that would withstand any reasonable scrutiny. More importantly, Liu Mei had legitimate access to the quantum research facility for routine maintenance work, the kind of unremarkable technical support that kept sophisticated research installations functioning properly. Sarah's appearance had changed dramatically since the morning. Gone was the professional academic wardrobe, replaced by the dark coveralls and equipment belt of a technical specialist. Her hair was now black and cut in a different style, and subtle changes to her makeup had altered the shape of her face enough to confuse facial recognition systems. Most importantly, she carried the identification cards, security codes, and technical equipment that Liu Mei would need to perform routine maintenance on quantum computing systems. The facility's after-hours security protocols followed patterns that American intelligence had been monitoring for months. Between 1 o'clock and 1:30 a.m., there was a shift change that created a 20-minute window when certain areas of the complex were less carefully monitored. It was a brief vulnerability in an otherwise sophisticated security system, but it was enough for someone who knew exactly where to be and what to do. Sarah approached the facility's service entrance with the confident stride of someone who belonged there. The night shift guard recognized Liu Mei's credentials and waved her through with the bored efficiency of someone processing the 5th maintenance call of the week. Her cover story was simple and believable, a routine software update that had been delayed due to scheduling conflicts and needed to be completed before morning shift arrived. The interior corridors of the facility felt different at night. The bright academic atmosphere of the daytime tour was replaced by the sterile functionality of a high-security installation. Emergency lighting cast long shadows, and the hum of ventilation systems was more noticeable without the background noise of researchers going about their daily work. Sarah made her way through the complex using memorized route that avoided the most heavily monitored areas. Her technical equipment included devices that could detect and temporarily disable certain types of surveillance cameras, though she used them sparingly to avoid triggering automated security systems that monitored for electronic anomalies. The quantum computing laboratory was protected by multiple layers of security, each one requiring different types of access credentials. Sarah's Liu Mei identity provided legitimate access to the outer areas, but the quantum computer itself was protected by biometric scanners that required authorized personnel to provide both fingerprints and retinal patterns. This was where months of preparation paid off in ways that bordered on science fiction. Hidden within Sarah's contact lenses were synthetic overlays that would fool retinal scanners into reading patterns that belonged to Dr. Wang Lin, a research technician who had legitimate access to the quantum computer for maintenance purposes. Her fingertips had been temporarily modified with synthetic skin grafts that carried Wang Lin's fingerprint patterns, the result of intelligence work that had obtained his biometric data through means that Sarah preferred not to think about too carefully. The biometric scanners accepted her credentials without question, and Sarah found herself alone in the laboratory with one of the most advanced quantum computers on Earth. The machine hummed quietly in its climate-controlled chamber, processing calculations that pushed the boundaries of what was mathematically possible, while maintaining quantum states so delicate that a stray photon could destroy hours of computational work. Sarah connected her laptop to the maintenance terminal and began the process of uploading her algorithm. The code itself was elegant in its simplicity, designed to integrate seamlessly with the quantum computer's existing error correction protocols. To any casual observer, it would appear to be a routine software update intended to improve the system's performance and reliability. But Sarah knew better. Once installed, her algorithm would create a backdoor that gave American intelligence agencies real-time access to any information processed by the quantum computer. More importantly, it would propagate to other quantum systems throughout the Chinese research network, eventually compromising the encryption protocols that protected Beijing's most sensitive military communications. The upload process took 12 minutes, during which Sarah monitored both her laptop screen and the laboratory's security systems. Her modified credentials would allow her to remain in the facility for another hour before automated systems began questioning why a maintenance technician was taking so long to complete routine work. As the algorithm integrated with the quantum computer's operating system, Sarah felt a mixture of professional satisfaction and personal regret. She had just completed one of the most sophisticated intelligence operations in history, potentially giving her country unprecedented access to Chinese strategic communications. But she had also violated the trust of researchers like Dr. Zhang Yifei, who genuinely believed that scientific collaboration could transcend political boundaries. The quantum computer accepted her algorithm without any indication that its security had been compromised. Error logs showed only routine maintenance activities, and performance metrics suggested that the system was functioning better than ever. Sarah's code was now embedded so deeply within the quantum computer's operating system that detecting it would require the kind of comprehensive security audit that might not occur for months or years. Sarah was preparing to leave when she heard footsteps in the corridor outside the laboratory. Her blood pressure spiked as she realized that someone was approaching the quantum computing area during hours when it should have been completely unoccupied. She quickly disconnected her laptop and moved to a maintenance panel that would provide a legitimate reason for her presence if someone entered the laboratory. The footsteps paused outside the laboratory door, and Sarah heard the soft beep of someone using an access card. Her mind raced through possible explanations for what was about to happen. Had security noticed something unusual about her access patterns? Was this a routine patrol that would pass quickly, or had her mission been compromised? The door opened, and Dr. Zhang Yifei stepped into the laboratory. Sarah felt her carefully maintained composure threaten to crack as she realized that the one person who could most easily identify her as Lin Wei-ming was now standing 10 feet away. Her disguise was good enough to fool automated systems and unfamiliar security personnel, but Zhang had spent hours talking with her just days earlier. If he looked at her carefully, he might recognize her despite the changed appearance. "Good morning," Zhang said in Mandarin, his tone suggesting nothing more than mild curiosity about finding a maintenance technician in his laboratory at such an unusual hour. "I wasn't aware that any work was scheduled for tonight," Sarah responded in accented Mandarin that matched Liu Mei's background. keeping her face turned away from Zhang while pretending to examine the maintenance panel.
Routine software update, sir.
It was supposed to be completed yesterday, but there were scheduling conflicts. I apologize for the late hour, but the system needs to be ready for tomorrow's research schedule. Zhang nodded, apparently accepting her explanation. How much longer will you need? Just a few more minutes to verify that everything uploaded correctly. I'll wait, Zhang said, settling into a chair near the laboratory's main console. I want to run some calculations before the morning shift arrives, and I prefer to personally verify that the system is functioning properly after any maintenance work. Sarah's heart sank as she realized that Zhang intended to test the quantum computer immediately after she finished her work. If her algorithm had introduced any detectable anomalies, he would discover them within minutes of her departure. 3 years of preparation could unravel because of her bad timing in encountering the one person who would immediately notice if something was wrong with his precious quantum computer. She continued her pretend maintenance work while trying to think of a way to delay Zhang's testing long enough for her algorithm to fully integrate with the system. Her code was designed to be undetectable during normal operation, but it needed several hours to properly embed itself within the quantum computer's error correction protocols.
Dr.
Zhang, she said carefully. I should mention that this update included some modifications to the error correction algorithms. The system might show some unusual behavior patterns for the next few hours while the new protocols optimize themselves. It was a dangerous gamble. If Zhang was suspicious of her presence, claiming that the system would behave unusually might prompt him to investigate further. But if he accepted her technical explanation, it might buy her the time she needed for the algorithm to complete its installation process. Zhang looked up from the console with interest. What kind of unusual behavior should I expect? Nothing that affects computational accuracy, Sarah replied quickly. But you might see some variations in processing speed and memory allocation patterns. The new algorithms are more efficient, but they need time to analyze the system's performance characteristics before they reach optimal configuration.
How long does this optimization process typically take? Usually between 4 and 6 hours.
Zhang considered this information for a moment, then shrugged. In that case, I'll postpone my calculations until later this morning. I don't want to interfere with system optimization, and I have enough other work to keep me busy. Sarah felt a wave of relief as Zhang gathered his papers and prepared to leave the laboratory. Her improvised explanation had worked, buying her the time she needed for the algorithm to complete its installation without detection. Thank you for your consideration, Dr. Zhang. The system should be running at peak efficiency by the time your research team arrives. I appreciate good technical support, Zhang replied. Too many maintenance technicians don't understand how their work affects ongoing research. It's refreshing to encounter someone who thinks about the broader implications of system modifications. As Zhang left the laboratory, Sarah realized that she had just received professional appreciation from the man whose computer systems she was in the process of compromising. The irony was almost overwhelming, but she forced herself to focus on completing her mission successfully. She spent another 10 minutes in the laboratory, ensuring that her algorithm was integrating properly with the quantum computer's operating system, and that no traces of her unauthorized access remained in the system logs. When she finally left the facility, everything appeared exactly as it had been when she arrived. The drive back to Beijing took place in the pre-dawn darkness, with Sarah's rental car navigating mountain roads that were treacherous in the rain, but she felt a growing sense of accomplishment as she put distance between herself and the quantum research facility. She had successfully completed the most critical phase of her mission, installing code that would give American intelligence agencies unprecedented access to Chinese quantum computing capabilities. As the sun rose over Beijing, Sarah began the process of transforming herself back into Lin Wei Ming for the return flight to Taiwan. The Lu Mei identity would disappear as completely as it had appeared, leaving no trace that could connect her to the night's activities at the quantum research facility. But as she prepared to board her flight at Beijing Capital International Airport, Sarah couldn't shake the image of Dr. Zhang Yifei thanking her for being a conscientious technician who understood the importance of supporting scientific research. In a few hours, when her algorithm began transmitting Chinese quantum computing data to servers controlled by American intelligence agencies, Zhang would discover that his trust in technical support personnel had been catastrophically misplaced. The aircraft lifted off from Beijing as the city awakened to another day of routine scientific research and technological advancement. In the quantum laboratory that Sarah had left behind, sophisticated computers continued their calculations, processing information with unprecedented speed and accuracy, while secretly transmitting copies of everything they computed to adversaries who remained invisible and undetected. Operation Shadow Net was complete, But Sarah knew that the real consequences of her work were only beginning to unfold. The intelligence advantages gained through her mission would reshape the balance of power between nations, but they would also destroy the career and reputation of a man whose only crime had been believing that science could transcend political boundaries. 6 months after Sarah Lin, Wei Ming Chen had walked through the security checkpoint at the Meridian Research Complex and revealed her true identity to Marcus Rodriguez. The world had changed in ways that most people would never understand. The quantum algorithm she had installed in Beijing's most advanced computer systems was quietly revolutionizing American intelligence capabilities, providing access to Chinese military communications that had previously been considered unbreakable. But success in the intelligence world often came with prices that weren't calculated in operational planning, and Sarah was beginning to understand the personal cost of her 3-year deception. She sat in her apartment overlooking the Potomac River, reading a news article on her tablet that made her stomach clench with something that felt uncomfortably like guilt. The headline was buried on page 6 of the international section, the kind of minor diplomatic news that most readers would skip over without consideration. Chinese quantum researcher arrested on espionage charges. The article was brief and filled with the carefully neutral language that characterized reporting on sensitive political matters. Dr. Zhang Yifei, director of the Beijing Quantum Research Institute, had been detained by Chinese security services on suspicion of providing classified research information to foreign intelligence agencies. His colleagues expressed shock and disbelief, describing him as a dedicated patriot whose only interest was advancing scientific knowledge for the benefit of humanity. Sarah knew the truth, though she could never share it with anyone outside the most classified circles of American intelligence. Zhang Yifei hadn't betrayed his country's secrets to foreign adversaries. Instead, foreign adversaries had exploited his trust and good intentions to steal those secrets without his knowledge or consent. The algorithm Sarah had installed in the Beijing facility was working exactly as designed, providing American intelligence agencies with real-time access to Chinese quantum computing research and the military communications that relied on Chinese quantum encryption. It was an intelligence coup of historic proportions, the kind of strategic advantage that could influence international relations for years to come. But the Chinese security services had eventually noticed that their most sensitive communications were somehow being intercepted by American intelligence agencies. They had conducted an investigation that led them to the quantum research facility, where they discovered that someone had modified the computer systems in ways that created unauthorized access points. Zhang Yifei, as director of the facility, was held responsible for the security breach. Chinese investigators had no way of knowing that the modifications had been installed by an American operative using stolen biometric credentials. All they knew was that classified information was being compromised, and someone had to be held accountable. Sarah's tablet chimed with an encrypted message from Director Walsh, requesting her presence at the Meridian facility for an urgent briefing. She saved the news article to a secure folder, though she knew she would never be able to forget the photograph of Zhang Yifei being led away in handcuffs, his expression showing the bewilderment of someone who couldn't understand why his life was suddenly falling apart. The 15th floor of the Meridian complex felt different when Sarah arrived that afternoon. The same sophisticated security, the same subtle hum of advanced electronics, but an atmosphere of tension that hadn't been present during her previous visits. Something had changed in the 6 months since Operation Shadnout's completion, and Sarah suspected she wasn't going to like what she was about to learn. Director Walsh was waiting for her in the same briefing room where she had received her mission parameters. But this time, he wasn't alone. Colonel Mitchell was there, along with Dr. Collins Hartness, Torres and several other officials whose presence suggested that whatever was happening extended far beyond routine operational debriefing. Dr. Shen, Walsh began, using the name that had become her primary identity once again. I assume you've seen the news reports about Dr. Zhang Yifei's arrest. I have, Sarah replied carefully. I assume the Chinese investigation has identified the quantum facility as the source of their security compromise. It has. But that's not our most immediate concern. Walsh activated a wall display that showed a map of East Asia, with red indicators marking locations throughout China, Taiwan, and several neighboring countries. Beijing's response to the security breach has been more extensive than we anticipated. Colonel Mitchell leaned forward, his expression grim. They've implemented comprehensive overhauls of their quantum encryption systems, not just at the research facility, but throughout their entire military and intelligence networks. Our access has been systematically eliminated across all previously compromised systems. Sarah felt a sinking sensation as she realized what they were telling her. How much access have we lost?
93%. Doctor,
Torres replied. As of this morning, we can no longer intercept Chinese military communications, monitor their intelligence operations, or access their strategic planning databases. 3 years of intelligence advantages have been eliminated in less than 2 weeks. The implications were staggering. Sarah's mission had provided American intelligence agencies with unprecedented insight into Chinese strategic thinking, military capabilities, and international intentions. That information had influenced everything from diplomatic negotiations to military deployment decisions, giving the United States advantages in dealing with China that had been considered permanent. There's more, Walsh continued. Beijing has shared their security assessment with several allied nations, warning them about American capabilities in quantum computing and cryptographic penetration. Russia, Iran, and North Korea have all begun implementing similar protective measures based on Chinese recommendations. Sarah realized that her successful mission had triggered a global response that was now undermining American intelligence capabilities far beyond what she had originally compromised. The Chinese investigation into Dr. Zhang Yifei's supposed betrayal had revealed enough about American quantum computing capabilities to prompt a worldwide defensive reaction. What does this mean for future operations? Sarah asked. Colonel Mitchell's expression was bleak. It means we're facing an intelligence capability gap that could take decades to overcome. Quantum encryption is becoming the global standard for protecting sensitive communications, and our ability to penetrate those systems has been severely compromised. The room fell silent as the full implications of the situation settled over everyone present. Sarah's mission had been a brilliant tactical success that was turning into a strategic disaster, providing short-term intelligence advantages that had now been lost, while simultaneously revealing American capabilities to adversaries around the world. But there was something else in the atmosphere of the briefing room, a tension that suggested more bad news was coming. Dr. Chen, Walsh said carefully. We've received intelligence indicating that Beijing suspects American involvement in the quantum facility compromise. They don't know the specific details of our operation, but they're actively investigating the possibility that the security breach was the result of foreign intelligence activities. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Do they suspect Lin Weiming's involvement? Not specifically, but they're conducting comprehensive background investigations of everyone who had access to the facility in the months before the breach was discovered. That includes all foreign nationals who participated in conferences, academic exchanges, or collaborative research programs. Dr. Torres consulted her tablet before continuing. NSA Signals Intelligence indicates that Chinese security services are particularly interested in foreign academics who visited the facility and subsequently returned to their home countries. They're conducting interviews, analyzing travel patterns, and reviewing electronic communications. The implications for Sarah's cover identity were obvious and terrifying. Lin Weiming had attended the Shanghai conference, toured the Beijing facility, and then returned to Taiwan, where she supposedly resumed her academic research. If Chinese investigators looked at her activities too closely, they might discover inconsistencies that could reveal her connection to American intelligence agencies. How exposed am I? Sarah asked. Walsh's expression was troubled. Probably not enough for them to identify you specifically, but enough to make continuing the Lin Weiming identity extremely risky. If you return to Taiwan or attempt to maintain your academic reputation, Chinese intelligence services will eventually subject you to the kind of scrutiny that could compromise your real identity. Sarah realized what he was telling her. Lin Weiming, the identity she had carefully maintained for over a decade, was now too dangerous to use. The academic reputation she had genuinely earned, the professional relationships she had built, and the career she had developed were all casualties of her mission's success.
There's one more thing, Colonel Mitchell said.
We've learned that Dr. Zhang Yifei's interrogation has been more extensive than initially reported. Chinese security services aren't just treating this as a case of individual betrayal. They suspect a sophisticated foreign intelligence operation, and they're determined to identify everyone involved. Sarah thought about the news article she had read that morning, about a man whose only crime had been trusting a maintenance technician who wasn't who she appeared to be. Zhang Yifei was probably enduring interrogation techniques designed to extract confessions of treason that he couldn't provide because he genuinely hadn't committed any treasonous acts. What happens to him? Sarah asked quietly. Best case scenario, he spends the rest of his life in a Chinese prison, Dr. Papin, Torres replied. Worst case scenario, he's executed as an example to other researchers who might be tempted to collaborate with foreign intelligence agencies. The weight of that information settled over Sarah like a physical burden. Her successful mission hadn't just compromised Chinese security capabilities, and triggered a global defensive reaction. It had also destroyed the life of an innocent man whose only mistake had been believing that scientific collaboration could transcend political boundaries. "What are my options?" Sarah asked. Walsh consulted his notes before answering. "Officially, Dr. Sarah Chen will continue her research work here at Meridian, focusing on quantum computing applications that support American intelligence capabilities. Unofficially, you'll be developing countermeasures to the encryption protocols that Beijing is implementing to protect their communications." "And Lin Wei-ming?" "Lin Wei-ming will gradually disappear from academic circles. She'll stop publishing papers, decline conference invitations, and eventually fade from professional visibility. As far as the world is concerned, she'll become another researcher who left academia for private industry work that doesn't require public recognition." Sarah nodded, understanding that she was being told to abandon the identity and career she had spent years building. The Lin Wei-ming who had earned recognition as one of Taiwan's leading quantum physicists would become a ghost, erased as completely as if she had never existed. "There is one other possibility," Colonel Mitchell said carefully, "if you're willing to consider it." Sarah waited for him to continue. "We're developing a new operation targeting Russian quantum computing facilities. It would require someone with your expertise and operational experience, someone who understands both the technical and human aspects of penetrating advanced research facilities. Another mission. Another identity. Another opportunity to exploit the trust of researchers who believed that science could transcend political boundaries." Sarah realized that her success in Beijing had marked her as someone capable of conducting operations that few other people could accomplish, but it had also trapped her in a cycle of deception that would define the rest of her professional life. "How long do I have to decide?" she asked. "The Russian operation launches in 6 months, Walsh replied. "But if you choose to participate, you'll need to begin preparing the cover identity immediately." Dr. Elena Volkov, a quantum physicist from Estonia with impeccable academic credentials and no apparent connection to American intelligence agencies. Sarah looked around the briefing room at the faces of people who had planned and supervised her mission. People who understood better than anyone the personal cost of the work they did. They had asked her to sacrifice 3 years of her life to live as someone she wasn't, and now they were asking her to do it again. But as she considered her options, Sarah realized that she had already made her choice. Dr. Zhang Yifei was sitting in a Chinese prison because of her successful mission. And somewhere in Russia, researchers were working on quantum computing projects that posed threats to American national security. The intelligence community needed operatives who could penetrate those facilities without being detected, and Sarah had proven that she possessed the technical skills and personal discipline to conduct such operations successfully. "I'll do it," she said, "but I want guarantees that any innocent researchers who become collateral damage in the operation receive protection if possible." Walsh nodded. "We'll do everything we can to minimize unintended consequences. But you understand that we can't always control how target nations respond to security breaches." Sarah understood perfectly. She also understood that her choice to continue conducting covert operations meant abandoning any hope of returning to a normal life. Dr. Sarah Chen would remain a fiction. Dr. Lin Wei-ming would become a ghost, and Dr. Elena Volkov would be born to serve American intelligence interests in penetrating Russian quantum computing capabilities. As she left the Meridian facility that evening, Sarah walked past Marcus Rodriguez at the security checkpoint. He nodded professionally, recognizing her as the woman whose true identity had changed his understanding of the secret world that existed within the ordinary-looking office building. Neither of them spoke, but Sarah saw something in his expression that might have been respect mixed with sympathy. Marcus had been upgraded to a higher security clearance after witnessing her revelation, and he now understood enough about covert operations to recognize the personal sacrifices that people like Sarah made in service of national security objectives. The elevator carried her to the parking garage, where she would drive home to an apartment that reflected the life of someone who didn't really exist. Tomorrow, she would begin the process of becoming Dr. Elena Volkov, learning to speak with a Baltic accent and memorizing the biography of someone whose academic career would serve as cover for another intelligence operation. But tonight, she would remember Dr. Zhang Yifei and the price that innocent people sometimes paid for the secret victories that protected national security. It was a burden she would carry for the rest of her career, a reminder that success in the intelligence world often came with human costs that couldn't be calculated in operational reports or strategic assessments. The rain had stopped, and the city lights reflected off wet pavement as Sarah drove through the Virginia suburbs toward another evening of solitude and preparation for a mission that hadn't been officially authorized yet. Somewhere in Russia, Quantum physicists were working late into the night, advancing their research without knowing that an American operative was already beginning to plan their next major security compromise. The secret war continued, fought in the spaces between official acknowledgement and absolute denial, where victory often looked indistinguishable from defeat, and success was measured in intelligence advantages that couldn't be publicly celebrated. Sarah Chen, who wasn't really Sarah Chen, was one of its most effective soldiers, though she sometimes wondered whether the battles she won were worth the casualties they produced. But wondering was a luxury that covert operatives couldn't afford for very long. In 6 months, Dr. Elena Volkov would attend her first academic conference in Moscow, and the cycle of deception, infiltration, and compromise would begin again.